My Citroen Ami is back! But what happened? And what has the dealership done to resolve it? For those of you that have been following the channel, you'll know that my 2022 Citroen Ami suffered some mechanical difficulties and had to go back to the dealership with just 300 miles on the clock and a couple of months old. Not ideal. So I don't have a huge amount of information about what was actually wrong, but the dealership, with the assistance of the Citroen's technical team, decided to replace the motor. I've heard of one other person having a very similar issue, and it's been diagnosed as a failing bearing in the motor, and they're also awaiting a new motor to be fitted for the same reason. So all in all, it was away for a couple of weeks. I thought that was perfectly reasonable, given it's a new vehicle. None of them have ever suffered these issues in the UK, obviously, because there's not very many of them on the roads. The parts were having to be brought in. And all in all, they're pretty good, I thought. The time to resolve, no problems with that at all. I had a Peugeot E208 courtesy car for most of the time, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Unfortunately, it's now back resembling an igloo. If you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I've not got the 360 camera on, I've just got the normal one, but the roof currently has some frozen snow on it, because we had a fair bit of snow at the weekend there, and now it is absolutely freezing. I reckon it's probably -6, -7 at the moment. It's properly cold when I'm filming this. Actually, to the point where when I turn the ignition on, it actually goes straight into turtle mode, which I haven't seen it do. I'm going to talk a bit more about cold weather performance in a moment, but at the moment when I start it up, the little turtle comes on the display, indicating reduced performance, and normally you'd only see that when the battery is very low, but in this case it's because it's very cold. Very happy with the service I received from Warner's Citroen in Tewkesbury, who were great to deal with, kept me updated throughout the process, and even I suffered a puncture in the E208, which involved me having to call Peugeot Assistance, which is provided by the RAC, and get assistance to get myself to the dealership, because it was bad enough that the tyre inflation kit didn't work. Because obviously most new cars, it's not an EV thing, don't tend to come with spare wheels anymore. You get the little thing of tyre gunk in the compressor to try and seal the puncture and get you moving again. Well, that didn't quite work. The RAC guy did a bit of a temporary bodge on it, and I limped with him following me to the dealership where they sorted out the tyre. Warners were very good about that. They got me back on the road. I had to wait a long time for the RAC though, which was not so good. I've seen a couple of people musing about potentially obtaining a spare wheel for Ami. Now, there's nowhere to put it, so I don't know how you're going to carry it. I did see one guy in France though fashioned a kind of bracket to put it on the back. That's very innovative. But it does raise a bit of an issue. If you do suffer a puncture and you're relying on just calling the RAC, you might well need to have quite a long wait. So I waited 6.5 hours for an RAC patrol to come out to me to help with the puncture in the E208, which was far from ideal. So do bear that in mind. What I'm gonna now definitely do for Ami is get a tin of Holts TyreWeld or similar and keep it in here just in case, because although with the E208, the inflation kit didn't get me mobile again, there's a chance that it would. So I think having some of that to help seal a puncture and get you moving again is much better than waiting in a car park for the RAC. So I do urge you to think about that. If you're buying an Ami, if you're thinking about, what happens if I get a puncture, or I'll just phone the RAC, that'll be fine. Response times, especially when it's cold, especially, a lot of people with flat batteries, all that kind of winter stuff, you might be waiting a long time. I did wait a long time, wasted a whole day. It's not recommended. So anything you can do to increase your chances with a puncture, I would definitely do. There's a link in the description for some Holts TyreWeld. See, it's an Amazon affiliate link. I get a couple of pence if you buy it. It keeps the channel running. But you can also buy that from, supermarkets, petrol stations. It's available pretty much everywhere, and it's quite highly regarded as a decent way to keep you moving. As long as the puncture isn't too bad, it should help seal it and let you get to somewhere where you can get it fixed. And I will definitely be ordering a tin to keep it in here, because I don't want to have to go through that again if I can help it. So the cold weather then, let's talk about the cold weather. Quite a lot of people with Amis are saying that, well, now that it's really cold, I notice that when I drive along, sometimes I'll hear a beep and it will then slow down. It'll go into a kind of limp mode. and I'll struggle to get above sort of 20 mile an hour. And I have experienced that. It doesn't always coincide with the turtle coming on the dash. That seems to be what's happening today, now that it's down to like sort of -7 rather than just sort of -1, -2. That does unfortunately seem to be a characteristic of the drivetrain. It says in the user manual actually that when the temperatures are below 5 degrees, it can go into a protection mode to protect the battery. Now, I wasn't aware of this. That is definitely news to me. I mean, I haven't read the manual, of course. You know, it's just, I'm just that kind of person. I'm not going to sit and read the manual. I'll just get on with it. But this is a very real concern. If you are dependent on using this vehicle in the cold, you might well encounter this issue, in which so it does slow down. What I've found is that it doesn't stay slow, so you might get a little bit of period where it's slow and then it'll speed up again and it'll be fine. It's worse if the heater is turned on, if you're having to clear the windscreen with the heater, but if you turn the heater off, it then sometimes sorts itself out. What I've also found is if you charge immediately before leaving, and that must get the battery warm enough that it doesn't consider that to be an issue. So as long as if you unplug just before you leave, that seems to certainly help. Storing it indoors if you can, so in a garage, and you can see there's a garage behind me and it's not in it because I've got an old Astra convertible in there at the moment, which is even more fragile with the cold weather. I need to get that moved to somewhere else so that this can go in the garage, I think, because keeping the cold off it, keeping it indoors, seems to help as well with the cold weather performance. So I went out Christmas shopping yesterday. It went into this sort of restricted power mode on the way there briefly, and then it sort of sorted itself out. And I parked in a multi-storey car park, which was quite the experience. Left-hand drive, ticket barrier over here. Obviously I did manage to reach over and it was fine, but you want to plan for that. And I think just being parked inside for an hour or so whilst I did some proper man shopping, you know, in and out as quick as I could, it was then must have been warm enough that it was absolutely fine for the journey home. There was no problem at all. It just drove as normal. So I think this cold weather thing, I mean, the jury's still out on it. Is it performing as it says it will in the manual? Yes. Could it be better? Is there maybe some improvements could be made to the software that help with that? I don't know. I think it's becoming more of an issue, especially with this current cold snap we've seen in England. I think that is definitely meaning a lot of people are being surprised by this. My commute at the weekend's going to be quite interesting. Although it is meant to start getting a little bit warmer. I think we're moving out of these super cold temperatures over the next couple of days. So I'm working on Saturday and Sunday on the run up to Christmas. So there'll be a couple of Ami commute videos coming for you very shortly. And I'm hopeful that it just gets a little bit warmer and we don't quite see as many issues with the cold weather. It is quite concerning. I think if it was your only vehicle, you'd be a bit worried about it and maybe be questioning whether it's suitable for you or not. I think that's absolutely fair. It definitely wasn't something that I was aware of, and I think that it definitely impacts the sort of usability in the winter in these super cold conditions. You know, there's no doubt about that. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it. It's an undesirable characteristic. You know, we're getting into the realms of, oh well, they all do that, sir. You know, which you tend to hear if you try to report issues with a new vehicle. And you know, it's that cliche. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because I think there are some people that are quite unhappy. I'm not too fussed. I managed to get where I'm going. I think prolonged periods of it being in the limp mode would certainly be difficult if you're having to use faster roads, 40 mile an hour roads and stuff. You're going to be pulling over to let people pass and stuff like that. It's not ideal. I did find that an ignition cycle seems to knock it out of it. So if you pull over, turn the ignition off, turn it back on, it then will unleash the full speed for a bit longer. I don't know what that's all about, but certainly I know it's going to become a bit of an issue for some people. So one thing I want to be clear on when I talk about reduced performance in the winter, and the fact it's going into a kind of limp mode and it's not as fast as it should be, that is not a typical characteristic of an electric vehicle. Any other EV I've ever driven might suffer in terms of range in the cold. You might see a little bit of reduced range and a bit of increased power consumption. And if you watch my recent video where we did a cold weather range test of the Peugeot E208, you see that it will, you know, not go as far because it's cold. Everybody knows that. That's just battery chemistry and what have you. And to be fair, you know, petrol and diesel cars have increased fuel consumption when it's really cold as well. But this performance thing I've only ever experienced this with Ami. Any other EV I've ever driven, it'll perform just as it does when it's cold as when it's warm. There's not really a thing. So I think before you go on the offensive in the comments, oh, all EVs are crap. No, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about this particular EV with its tiny little battery and perhaps quite primitive battery management. You know, make of that what you will. I don't know the full technical ins and outs of why it has to protect itself against cold temperatures to the extent that it does, but that's definitely unique to Ami, and that's not representative of EVs. And I just want to clear that up before anybody that's perhaps not familiar with EVs gets the wrong end of the stick here. And what I will say, I know it's very cold. The windscreen heater and stuff, like I've said before, it keeps the windscreen clear. I think if I left it parked up with the heater running long enough, it would probably defrost the roof and get all this ice off the roof. But it doesn't do much to keep you warm. And I've also found that actually a lot of the time having to drive with the windows cracked open just to keep them clear, as always, because I still haven't got round to using the Fog X. And it's pretty cold. You're going to need some decent gloves. These were like £6 in Tesco, and although they're a bit too chunky, they're fine for driving in, but they're a bit chunky for anything else. You definitely need to keep your hands warm, because I find that as soon as your hands are cold, that's it, it's game over. I mean, the rest of me, you know, I'm not wrapped up at the moment, but I'd quite happily drive like this. I'll be fine. All right, a big coat would make me warmer, but keep your hands warm, and that should definitely make a big difference. But don't expect the heater that's in here to keep you super warm. It's a moped with a roof, as I keep saying, it's a moped with a roof, and then therefore it's only marginally more comfortable than a moped. You're not exposed to the elements, but it's still cold in here. All in all, I mean, I'm so glad it's back. I wish it was a little bit warmer, and I am glad we're seeing the end of this super cold weather. But it's back in business. I'll get some Ami commute videos for you very shortly, even if it is still super cold and we're going really slowly. Sod it, we're still doing it. I could use the well, you can't even see it because the window's frosted up, but he's Loudie is parked behind me today because when it first started snowing, we were having to do some stuff that Ami wasn't quite suitable for, and the BMW i3 is a bit of a handful when it's slippery. So I broke out the Audi with the 4-wheel drive and stuff, and it would definitely be the more capable vehicle for me to take to work this weekend. But we're not going to do that. We're going to use Ami, and I'm going to own my, you know, I've bought it. I need to use it when it is what it is. And I actually still really enjoy driving it, even when it's this cold, even when it's a bit miserable. It still puts a smile on my face. So we're going to go with it. But I understand why if you had these two options in front of you, you'd maybe be choosing the comfortable car with a heater and all that stuff when it's this cold. But that's just me. This was just a quick update to let you know that it's back. We're back in business. It's all good. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.